views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Coming up on this edition of Perspectives with Daren Jaime, we talk about New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo, who has resigned from office. We talk about the fall from grace. Also, new governor, Kathy Hochul. What's her scorecard so far? Plus, more than 1 million New Yorkers have moved out of New York State in over a decade. That and more on this edition of Perspectives with yours truly, Daren Jaime.
What's on your mind? Express what's on your mind. What's on your mind?
Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, just speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective with shines of light. Cause it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference in someone's life. Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.
What's your perspective? Let them know.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Perspectives. I am Daren Jaime. We thank you for joining us. As always, you can watch BronxNet, Perspectives on BronxNet TV. And you can also check us out on the website at bronxnet.org, our social media platforms, BronxNet TV. Now, if you're trying to reach me personally, my professional page on Facebook, Daren C. Jaime, and then also on Instagram and Twitter at DCJaime23. Well, as we said, New York State has a new governor. Her name, Kathy Hochul. She takes over after former New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo resigned amidst a sexual harassment crisis and allegations where at least 11 women have been confirmed to be sexually harassed by the governor. The new governor now takes office and trying to set a new precedent: transparency in government. Well, how's the new governor doing? What was all about Governor Cuomo's fall from grace? Well, joining us now, none other than my sister, who joins us many times here on Perspectives, our guest to give us a good political perspective, none other than Joyce Johnson. And Joyce, good to have you here.
Always a pleasure. It's always something going on for us to talk about.
You know, it's always going to be something going on for us to talk about it. I'm glad to have you here, sharing with us here today. But listen, I want to talk to you from the perspective of this. New York State has a new governor at the helm. Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul is no more. She is now the governor following Governor Cuomo's resignation. Talk to us about, first of all, your thoughts on the governor's resignation.
Well, I think I'm probably, I'm not always in the majority, but I think I'm in the majority of opinion. It was time. The Attorney General's report, and I think it was time. I think he did the right thing, and I think now we keep it moving. I was certainly a believer in the report and the allegations made about the governor. And if there's any doubt in people's mind, I think you must err on the side of it is time to go, and he did the right thing.
Yeah,
perhaps kicking and screaming and not as happy about it, but the polls were not on his side. People were not on his side, and we need a governor who we have confidence in, who we respect, and I think former governor, if he were halfway right, he had made so many personal enemies, in throughout his life, frankly, with his modus operandi. No one could have been forgiving if he was just halfway right. And I don't think he was right at all.
Right. Well, I mean, let's talk about it for a second, because when you look right now, this will be the final scorecard, or the final score on the scorecard, his resignation, the sexual harassment. But when we look at the legacy of Governor Cuomo, how do you give him a grade?
He is, personality aside, because he's formidable. He's going to be a fighter. He's going to arm twist and arm wrestle you until he gets his way. And he's gotten his way. He has not been a bad governor. I was a great fan of his. I've not always been a fan, but I was certainly a great fan in the roll up, his handling of COVID, his command presence, information, push the envelope, get results, galvanize folks to do the right thing, and with the masking and all of that, the great public interest. He was a great cheerleader for the state, I thought, and a great example. And so I was very proud of that. But that was his last year in COVID. I think on balance, through his 3 terms or 2 terms, he's been a good governor. Not stellar, but a good governor. He's gotten a lot done. And it really is a shame, the personality, the flaw that was his background and all that came about, that was his undoing. But I also believe that while I'm giving him good grades, I don't know whether I would have voted for him for a 3rd term. But depending on who the competition was. But from what we saw, blinded, he was a good governor. Not perfect, but good.
What are we to make of the now Governor Kathy Hochul, who served as Lieutenant Governor, and her comment when it came to her getting ready to take office? She said, well, when it came to her relationship with Cuomo, it was quite distant. How does that play out, given the fact that now she takes over the reins?
Well, and so she's been also 2 terms as Lieutenant Governor, and she was being polite and distance, basically iced out. So what she did in the interim, her 2 terms, as it's been said and reported many times, she crisscrossed the state. She went into all 62 counties. No political figure I have ever known has done that, and she did it twice. And so with that, in those, we always think of downstate, upstate, Buffalo area, but the state in between. So she has made friends. She's learned a lot, I am sure, in her travels, because she had nothing else to do. Andrew didn't give her anything substantive. I think she's made good with her time in terms of relationships. I think those relationships will help her in dealing with the legislature. She knows them. She's been to their counties. She can talk in ways that other governors, and certainly Andrew, could not. That personal, what I call retail politics, she's done that well, and I think it's going to serve her. But she has, and she's a smart woman. It's not like that we hired someone out of nowhere who had no background. She's been a legislator. She's been a congresswoman. And so I think with 2 weeks in, the jury's out. She will make her plan. We will find out how good she is or not with her administration.
Yeah. Let's come back and take a quick break. Let's come back after we take a quick break and talk a little bit more about that. Her administration, what can we expect? We'll talk about that and more here on Perspectives. Not to mention, over the course of the last decade, more than 1 million New Yorkers have left New York State.
Yeah. Yeah.
We built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at BronxNet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
to the world.
BronxNet.
Back to our perspectives, our guest Joyce Johnson. We are talking about new governor Kathy Hochul and the work that she's doing right now as she takes office. Joyce, in the last break, we talked about her credentials, but let's talk about her policy and her initiatives going forward. She talked about, listen, transparency in office. I want to be more transparent. I want government to be more transparent for the people of the state of New York. We also saw immediately coming out of the gate her releasing more deaths related to COVID. And many people said, well, that's a good first step in the way of transparency. Do you think that we're going to get that transparency that she speaks of?
Well, what she was doing was cleaning up. What was released by under Cuomo was a flawed number, and she corrected that. I do believe I've known Kathy for a long time through Eleanor Roosevelt Legacy Committee. We met many years ago, and I was a great fan of hers. Certainly, being the first woman to run for lieutenant governor when she did, and so I don't know her more personally than that. But what I'm sensing is that she's smart enough to know that you cannot run this government like I'm the head and the rest of you do my bidding. And I think it's collegial. And I think under the Cuomo administration, the legislature were pretty much held hostage, the fight between what he wanted, the governor's office wanted, and what policies might have been the legislature. I think it was top down. This is what I want, and I want you to pass it. I think she will be, what I know of her, far more collegial and frankly respected because she's respecting her colleagues. So it's a different approach. I don't think you'll hear a lot of drama. I think from what I'm hearing of the legislature already, there's a willingness to work with her. And that comes to my earlier point about relationships. And those legislators all around the 62 counties where she showed up every year. Well, she has a relationship with them, and I think that will do her well.
Yeah.
In a dog fight, there's always politics.
Yeah. Well, this is for sure. The jury's still out. The honeymoon is still on, and of course, we'll have much more to talk about as she continues to close out the rest of former Governor Andrew Cuomo's term in office. I want to shift gears for a moment, begin to talk a little bit about New Yorkers. Said on the outset of the show that over the course of the last decade, since the year 2010, more than 1 million New Yorkers have left New York State. First question is, where are they going? Second question, why? Let me reverse it. Let's talk about the why. Why do you attribute more than 1 million New Yorkers heading out of the great Empire State?
Quality of life. Quality of life and taxes. Now, we do know that there's always a significant exodus for those who are retiring to the South. The weather and things like that. Florida has a lot of former New Yorkers in its midst. But certainly, I think the quality of life, industries, jobs are not what they used to be. Taxes, high taxes. But I think the combination of I cannot afford to live here, I'm being taxed too much. Is there any kind of return on my investment, i.e., those taxes? I'm not sure. And it's difficult. You can't subscribe one answer to it because while we're New York State, we're basically New York City and the rest of the state. And the rest of the state is like the Hudson Valley, that is certainly is different from Western New York where you are. But I think it's jobs, it's taxes, quality of life, and I'm out of here because I can go. I've saved money and affordability in housing.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. When you talk about affordability, let's talk about New York City for a minute. When you look at the price of rent, there was a candidate who ran for office before, and he ran under the guise the rent is too damn high.
He wasn't wrong.
People are saying it's not wrong. When you look at, you have to pay $1,500, $2,000, $2,500 in rent. This people say this is astronomical. You can almost have two mortgages down south for what you're paying here in New York, and it's almost common sense. And you got a lot of New Yorkers who are die hard, but you got a lot of other New Yorkers who are just simply dying, trying to survive, trying to live in a place that they call home.
Well, you know what? And what you just said, I've run for office several times. And one thing about this affordability was always a big issue for me because, New York is your hometown. Poughkeepsie's your hometown. Syracuse, Buffalo, whatever. Who has ever gone away to college or stayed in school, gotten a degree, and want to come home to where they grew up, and you can't because you can't afford it? That was certainly New York City, and frankly, in other parts of the state as well. That's almost, I sort of say, not anti-American, but anti against tradition. You've got to live elsewhere from where you grew up because I cannot afford to live here. And I'll tell you, in New York City, and sadly, most politicians, if you look in New York City, look at who's the biggest backer of our politicians, our political landscape, the real estate industry, the real estate boards, and they have great sway. And so many people have been elected with their endorsement, and with their endorsement or their influence on our politics, we have what we have. We don't have affordability at all levels. You know what? When I got out of college, there was a convention almost around the country. A third of your rent, should be perhaps at maximum, what you have to pay. That's at every town, every state, every whatever. New York, that could be 5 times what your salary is, and 60% of your income and 70% of your income. And that's why we had so many students coming out of college. It's no incentive to come to New York because you can't afford to live here. And if you do live here, you've got to be 5 people in a 2-bedroom apartment. Yeah. That's not right, and that has to change.
Yeah. Let me take a quick break. I want to merge both of what we talked about, not Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul, and also New Yorkers leaving. I want to talk about that when we return right here on Perspectives with yours truly, Daren Jaime. Welcome back to Perspectives. Daren Jaime here with you. Our guest, Joyce Johnson, as we continue our conversation, talking about former Governor Andrew Cuomo, Governor Kathy Hochul, and yes, the mass exodus of New Yorkers, more than 1 million leaving the state of New York in over a decade. Joyce, let me bring it here and talk about this here. We talked about the people who are making this exodus, and we know that affordability is huge. And when you talk about why some people are leaving, they'll tell you it's the T word, tax, taxes, being taxed out. You've got you've got tax for New York State, tax for New York City. You got a tobacco tax, you got property tax, you got school tax, and people just feel overtaxed. And the question I think that many New Yorkers are going to have is, how is this current governor going to look at the tax structure, and if there's going to be any tax relief for New Yorkers? Because honestly, if this continues and the economy continues to go the way that it goes, we saw 1 million people leave in a decade. This could be double if things don't get any better.
I think you're right, and that's one thing people have a choice, I believe, or they're going to find ways to find opportunities to leave. Um, that's one of the. We also have a deficit. There's no money. We've overspent, misspent, not spent the right way, and whatever. And where does that burden always fall? On we the people. And we the people are saying, time out. You've got me on every which way, and you have to be more frugal in our budgets and our spending allocations, because we can't afford to pay for this. So you know what, it's going to be a hard, um, long stretch to affordability, fiscal responsibility. Whatever has happened is where we are now. And as we the people, we cannot expect everything all at once. We want better schools. We want roadway. This whole issue of infrastructure. Geez whiz, the recent storm. It is something that cannot be ignored. Climate change. We're going to have to do something about that. But it's either raise taxes, or find some other form of revenue. And I don't know what that is. And isn't that the challenge for every single municipality, for every single state, for the U.S. government, as we're spending the people's money, because a lot of folks are like, well, we're raising taxes, or we're spending this and that and other. You're not spending your money. You're spending money that we the people have said, in order to keep this great nation, state, town, whatever, in shape and running, and where we can live, we have to pay taxes. But it has gotten overwhelming, and I don't have the answer.
Yeah.
And since I'm not elected, but I am going to hold those elected with the fire. We've got to find a different way.
And it's really a hard thing when you think about where we are in New York State. You've got a budget that really is tight. You see a lot of cuts to budgets. We understood in the height of COVID. Former Governor Cuomo then said, listen, we spent all this money on ventilators, and you got ventilator, and then you turn around and you look, and we just had this recent storm, and the question comes out: are we really fiscally responsible with this disaster preparedness? I mean, there's a lot of questions that still remain to be answered. But the problem is, we're New York State. And when people look at us, the two major states they look at, New York and California.
That's
and if
right.
New York is tilting, then it's an indicator for how things are tipping across the nation. But I argue that New York is tilting, but the rest of the country isn't doing so bad. As bad, I should say, simply because they don't have some of the burdens that we have.
That's really true. And to your point, this affordability, if in fact there was a standard that 30% of my income should be, it would be appropriate to have me pay 30% of my income. But when that becomes 40, 50, 60, then you get pinched in every single way. And there's only one industry that's on top, and that's the real estate industry. And I've always found, and this is where there is a marriage, I'm sorry to say, between the real estate industry and a lot of our elected officials. What does it take to get elected? Money. Who are some of the biggest investors in our political system? Real estate industry. Look at the amount. Daren, you haven't been in New York City, but my God, I thought we were, skyscraper. The level of development, and so they're investing money in, and so there's somebody who's willing to pay something to live here, but it will not be ordinary it will not be ordinary Americans, may not be ordinary New Yorkers or the rest of the country. A lot of it is foreign investment in our real estate.
Yeah.
But yeah, and we are being taxed on that, and we are not. There is no affordability for we the people.
Yeah. I just got a couple of minutes left, and literally less than two, probably. I want to get into this question right here. Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams looks like he's got the path towards becoming New York's next mayor. First of all, do you think that'll happen? And B, do you think Adams will do well?
The jury's out, and I say, you're elected, but the jury is out for me, and not just Eric Adams, for anyone, because anybody, we're all elected. Then the proof of the pudding, when the rubber meets the road, can you govern? Will you employ the best qualified people to run your agencies? Will you be inclusive in terms of the people's needs? Some of the biggest thing we've talked about before, the spike in crime, affordability in housing. These are things will be on Eric Adams's watch, and yes, he will be elected because, as you said, New York City is a Democratic town. Whoever is elected, with the exception of, well, Mike Bloomberg and oh God, Rudy Giuliani, but we've got 100+ year history, so he will be elected, and I'm wishing him well. And like I said with Kathy, the jury's still out. The potential of who he hires to do the good work and put in place the policies he comes forward with, his willingness to work with, the council, certainly Albany as well. And I believe he has the personality to do that. Andrew was a one-person band. Bill de Blasio was not successful in that arena. So bottom line, the jury's out.
Yeah, jury's out. We'll see how it goes. The bad news is we're out of time. The good news is there's so much more to talk about. We got to bring it back. So Joyce Johnson, good to have you with us again. Thank you for sharing with us here on Perspectives.
I'm loving it always. Thank you.
All righty. Joyce Johnson, our guest here on Perspectives. As always, we encourage you to stay connected to us here on the show. We'll be following the new elected governor, Kathy Hochul. We'll be following this mass exodus of New Yorkers and talk a little bit more on the show about what are some of the driving forces that continue to affect New Yorkers in their decision to want to leave the Empire State. I'm Daren Jaime. That's been our Perspectives. We thank you for joining us. Join us next week. We'll bring you another episode, elevating the conversation and more dialogue. Take care. Share your perspective with somebody else. You just don't know, I should say. It might make a difference in somebody else's life. Be well.
Runs the show, entertainment, he rocks it, politics, he locks it, the host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective with shines of light, cause it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference in someone's life. Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share